I have to apologize in advance. I'm not the most amazing storyteller. I'm going to try to write everything down as I remember it happening, though. My brother is an avid Redditor, and he told me I should post my story to this sub, so here we go. I used to date a guy named Norman back in high school. I am 29 now and have a 9-year-old daughter, so this must have been 13 years ago, roughly. I guess we were each other's first real relationship, and we even wore promise rings, which was a pretty big deal back then. We talked about getting married and what our life together would be like. Basically things people say or do when they've been together for a year as teenagers. As things go, we began to argue and fell into a cycle of breaking up and getting back together. I was immature and stupid, and I ended up getting together with another guy during one of our breakup periods. It became a messy love triangle situation, and Norman and I finished for good after I chose this other guy. Not my proudest moment, but I was 17 and stupid. Fast forward a few years, I made a Facebook account, and out of curiosity, one day I looked up Norman. We added each other on Facebook, and I messaged him apologizing for what had happened between us. I was happily married by that time, and we had just had my daughter. Norman was a good sport about it, and we remained amicable friends via social media. I really only ever talked to him to say happy birthday or randomly comment on a status. Another few years go by, and Norman gets into a relationship with a woman named Marissa. I was happy to see him moving on. My marriage didn't work out, but I was happy with my life and with raising my daughter by myself. During Christmas one year, I found an old Polaroid picture of me and Norman at a cabin weekend we had taken together when we were dating. I messaged him telling him about it and recalled how much fun we had had. He didn't reply, and this was before those scene stamps. And later I found out I was no longer on his friends list. A few months later, I got a message from Marissa. She basically said I was a whore and a slut, and that she saw the message I had sent him months ago. She told me to never ever contact him again, and that I needed to get over him. She went on to say how a charm bracelet he gave me was nothing compared to what he buys her, and that I was a cheap fuck he had had in high school. She said the silver promise rings were bullshit, and that he had bought her a gorgeous gold engagement ring with several diamonds. Well then, I never responded. I got off Facebook not long afterwards for a short period of time before remaking an entirely new profile and adding only close friends and family. Over the next few years, I would get ads from people I didn't know on all my social media. I knew it was her because the first account I mistakenly added began to send me abusive messages saying I was a loose slut and an attention-hungry whore who would never find true love. Afterwards, I never added anyone else I didn't personally know. I don't know how she kept finding my other accounts. She even somehow found out my phone number and tried to add me to WhatsApp. When Snapchat became a thing, I got an ad from a user who had one of my Facebook friends' names as their username and sent me snaps of whore and bitch in cursive handwriting on paper. I kept blocking her and maintaining no contact because honestly there was nothing else I felt I could do. This year I joined a dating app. I met a guy within the first week of being on it who I thought was amazing. His name was Nate, and he had a fair few pics of himself. He was average looking, so it didn't raise any flags with me that this suspiciously model-looking guy was trying to talk to me. He said he had an Android phone, so he couldn't FaceTime, but we could talk on the phone. It was definitely a man's voice. We texted a lot over the next few weeks, and things seemed to be going well enough to lead to a meetup. We scheduled a time and place. A week before, he asked me about past relationships. I didn't think too much of it when he asked me about my first real relationship. He seemed keen on details and asked me if I still had feelings for my ex. I reassured him I didn't, but that I also didn't hate him because I was the one who messed up, and he was actually a really good guy. We talked a lot about that relationship, and then he said he was so looking forward to meeting me. We had chosen to meet at an outdoor cafe because I didn't like the idea of meeting at my house without me actually knowing how this guy was. I was so excited, it was my first date in a long time. So imagine my confusion when I saw a woman spot me and smile and start walking over. I was too fucking shocked to say anything when she sat down. And yes, it was Marissa. She looked so smug. And she said, "Hey babe," and kept smiling. She confessed it was her. At that point I honestly just wanted to know why. What did I ever do to this chick to get all these reactions from her, and for her to actually invest time in doing all of this to me? Basically, this is what she told me. Almost 6 years ago now, when she and Norman got together, he told her all about me and our first relationship. She went on his friends list and saw me there and went through all my pictures and posts, trying to see what he saw in you. Then when I messaged him, she confronted him over why I had any pictures of me and him still, and why he needed to have me on Facebook. He deleted me and promised her not to talk to me again. She told me she hated me and said I was a stupid bitch who loves playing with people's emotions, and that she wanted to give me a taste of it. She said she made up accounts so she could keep an eye on me, and make sure I wasn't going to be in the same city as her and Norman. I live right outside their city, by the way. She would walk by places I'd say I'd be at if I was to make sure he wasn't meeting up with her in secret. She knew where I worked through my LinkedIn. She said the guy who I spoke to on the phone as Nate was her friend who was in on it and wanted to see me go down. She said she had originally planned to make me fall in love with Nate and then cheat on me, but she couldn't stand to wait so long. The most disturbing part, however, was when it came to my daughter. This woman had actually become extremely fixated on my daughter. She was convinced that she shared some of Norman's features and became obsessed, thinking that I had had a kid with him who I kept secret from him. She told me to not even think about suddenly revealing it to him in some ploy to get back together with him, and that she would be the only one to give him a baby. I was beyond horrified. It's not very exciting, but all I remember doing was getting up from the table and telling her to never contact me again. I got in my car and just sat there in silence for a bit. The first thing I did was call my daughter's school and alert the front desk of a possible situation where someone who was neither I nor her father would try to pick her up. I called my brother afterwards and told him what happened. He urged me to call the police. I did, but ended up getting the whole spiel about if I don't have any documented proof it's her or her saying any of these things. They couldn't help me out. It's been 2 months. I haven't heard anything from her, and my brother thinks that maybe she got what she wanted by asserting herself as Norman's one and only, and now she would leave me alone. Still, I have massive paranoia when it comes to what I post on social media and where she might be lurking next. I've told my family and close friends about the situation and warned them not to add any strange profiles or people they don't know. I told my neighbors the situation and showed them a picture of her so they could call the police if they saw anyone like her around the house. I wouldn't put it past her to know my address and start peeping in our windows or worse. I also changed the locks as a precaution. When I was 14, I lived in a small suburb in the Midwest full of ordinary people who didn't quite share my interests in goth metal and David Lynch movies. So I often took to the internet to meet people with like-minded interests in hopes of some stimulating conversation. Add to that, I had recently come out as gay to a couple of close friends, along with my mother, who did not take the news well at all. I didn't know any gay people in real life, so at the time the internet felt like the only place to meet other people sharing similar experiences. This was back in the days of dial-up, when it wasn't too uncommon for strangers to strike up an IM conversation based solely on their AOL profile. One day I received a message from a guy around my age named Steven. It started off pretty normal. We talked about our favorite music and movies, how much we hated school, and all the celebrities we thought were cute. He eventually revealed that he was 16 and was living with his older brother because his parents had kicked him out of the house for being gay. I thought it was cool to meet someone who lived nearby that was old enough to drive and didn't live with their parents. So we decided to meet up after a couple of weeks of super long chat sessions. I knew my parents would not be cool with me meeting a stranger from the internet, so I lied and told them he was a mutual friend of another friend they already knew and trusted. Once the plan was set, he showed up on a Friday evening in an old beat-up pickup truck. To my relief, he didn't look like a creepy old Catfish stalker. In fact, he looked just like his pictures. Red hair, goofy smile, but definitely not unattractive. We went for a ride, grabbed a bite to eat, stopped at a guitar store, and caught a new movie at the theater. I was so excited to have a friend with similar interests who knew about the pressures of being gay in a small town, and was happy to chauffeur me around. I decided I didn't want the fun to end once curfew drew closer and asked if he wanted to crash at my place. I had a trundle bed that pulled out from underneath my bed so he could sleep comfortably without the pressure of something sexual happening. After watching a DVD, we both passed out for about an hour when suddenly there's a loud knock at the front door. My parents awoke to find a police officer, also a friend of the family, as my dad was a retired cop standing at the door. I went out into the living room to see what was going on, and he proceeded to tell us that they received an anonymous phone call that someone in our house had been communicating with a wanted pedophile. My parents went into my room, where my computer was, and forced me to downgrade my AOL account to kids only while my new friend slept soundly nearby. I told them I had no idea what they were talking about, but since I was pretty much the only person using the internet extensively in our family, they said I would be banned from regular use until the mystery was solved. The next day, Steven and I were out for a ride, just enjoying the day, when all of a sudden we passed an oncoming SUV that slammed on its brakes and did a squealing 180, only to begin tailgating us and honking its horn furiously. I was screaming at my friend to slow down and asking if he knew what the hell was going on. Who was this crazy person behind us? He didn't say a word. We wound up in a high-speed chase that felt like hours, but probably only lasted about 5 minutes. Steven finally pulled over and jumped out of the car and motioned for me to follow, so I did. As we're getting out, the driver behind us headed straight for me and went to punch me square in the face, but stopped mere centimeters before actually hitting me. I pulled away from his shaking fist and saw a man in his 30s with eyes bulging out of his head. Literally. I much later realized he had Graves' disease, which, if any of you have seen what that looks like, it's nothing short of terrifying on an angry man, about to beat you to a pulp. This man went on to tell me that my friend was actually 21 years old and that he was his boyfriend, and that I needed to stay out of their lives if I wanted to live to see tomorrow. Once the initial shock and confusion wore off, I was absolutely broken. Scary Graves' guy took off with Steven and left me in the dust. I made my way home and didn't say a word to my parents. Just locked myself in my room and cried harder than I've ever cried before. I felt pretty damn stupid and ashamed for being so naive. I hoped the whole thing would just blow over without anyone ever finding out. But the story didn't end there. My older sister and I had our own landline phone number, separate from the main house phone that we shared, and kept the answering machine in my room. I came home from school one day and noticed my mom was already home, which was odd because she didn't usually get home from work until a few hours later. I went straight to my room to find a new message on the machine. It was the Graves dude, who went to leave a voicemail. But my sister had picked up mid-message, so I could hear their conversation over the recording. He pretended to be a faculty member of my school and asked for my mom's work number. He wound up calling her and giving her a detailed account of just who exactly I had been hanging around with. I went out to the back patio where my parents sat, looking just absolutely devastated as they informed me 2 FBI agents were on their way to get a report about my experience with Steven, who, by the way, wasn't actually named Steven. It was a fake name he had given me. Once the agents arrived, they informed me that he was wanted for the alleged molestation of 2 children, one of them as young as 10 years old. Needless to say, I was sick beyond belief. I complied with everything they asked me to do and agreed to testify against him on trial. I wasn't going to let this lying fucker get away with hurting any more kids, and apparently the other families involved were so embarrassed they didn't want to testify, leaving only me to do something about it. Around this time, I received a late-night phone call from Steven's boyfriend, asking if I was okay, checking up on how I was doing, and eventually turning the conversation around to a more flirtatious tone, and complimenting me on my musical taste, appearance, etc. At this point, I realized that this wasn't just a jealous, possessive boyfriend involved in a game of cat and mouse, but rather some kind of partner in crime who reveled in younger boys just as much as his disgusting significant other. I quickly hung up and never spoke to him again, though he did attempt to call me a few more times after that, according to the caller ID. Fast forward 1 year when Steven's court date finally arrived. I went to the courthouse downtown with my mom and was informed by an attorney that he took a plea deal and would be sentenced to jail for 1 year. Yep, that's right, folks. He only got 1 year because his victims refused to come forward in testifying. Another year later, I was 16 and finally had my own car, along with a great group of supportive friends. I had pretty much buried this memory far away in the deep recesses of my mind and never really thought much more about the encounter, until one day I started to receive IMs from an unknown screen name. These IMs consisted of death threats and facts about me that he only could have known from driving by my house and stalking me, like what kind of car I drove, the type of clothes I like to wear, what my daily schedule primarily consisted of, etc. This went on for a couple of weeks from various mystery handles, sharing in explicit detail how I was going to die. I was pretty freaked out and kept a close watch wherever I went. However, I never saw him creeping around, in spite of the heightened awareness of my surroundings. I eventually printed the messages out and shared them with my school principal, along with the police, assuming no doubt it was Steven attempting to contact me again, hell-bent on revenge. After filing a report, I luckily never heard from him again. I don't know what became of him. I don't even remember what his real name was. I can only hope something truly horrible has happened to him since all of this transpired. This is a story I kept secret from friends for a very long time. To this day, many people in my life don't know about it. Okay, let's start from the beginning, shall we? I work in the leasing office at a property in Texas. I also live on site. We have about 400 apartments and take up 2 sides of a street. I live across the street in the very back and try to keep to myself. I do not like for residents to know that I live there. About 2 months in, a woman and her 2 grown sons lease an apartment with us. The sons are twins. One has special needs, and the other is, well, different. He has a very active imagination and is very focused on sex. Almost immediately after they moved in, things started getting weird. The first encounter. One day, I was crossing the street after work to go home. As soon as I reached the other sidewalk, I heard a voice call out, "Raquel!" I turned towards the voice, which I realized was coming from the bus stop at the end of the street. I didn't recognize who it was until I got a little closer. Who the fuck is that? I think to myself. We meet face to face, and I realize who it is from when he moved in. I knew he was a little weird, so I was trying to keep my distance while still being polite. He's easy to piss off, and I do not know what he is capable of, but I don't want to make him think that there is anything behind the polite hello. He starts telling me that I look just like his baby mama, who lives in North Texas. Then he jumps to a different subject about how he had just run all the way from downtown to here. Then he decides to tell me his entire family history, naming all of his cousins and homeboys, rambling on and on about essentially nothing. I haven't said anything other than oh, and okay. I keep taking steps backwards to indicate that I'm trying to leave, but he keeps talking and moving closer to me. As I'm trying to leave, I notice that he has a huge boner. He was wearing basketball shorts, as always, so it is pretty difficult to hide. This creeps me the fuck out, and I somehow managed to get away from him. He sat at the bus stop staring at me as I walked away, and I didn't want him to know that I lived there, so I just kept walking down the street. Every now and then I would see him around the property, or he would come to the office, and it was very uncomfortable. The leasing office had a hallway leading to the manager's office, the copier, and the package room. His visits got to the point where every time I saw him walking up to the office, I would run and hide in the back and let the other staff deal with him. He wasn't creepy towards them, and they knew the situation, so it was cool. Cut to December. Our office was being remodeled, so we were using our business center as a temporary workspace. It is only one room. There is only one way in or out, and no place to hide. I was alone in the office one day, and who should come walking in but my worst nightmare? He needed to borrow our copy of his mail key because he misplaced his, or didn't have one, or whatever. We have to take an ID in order to release keys, and he didn't have his, so he had to go to his apartment, get the ID, and come back. In the time that he was gone, I set up my phone on my coworker's desk and started recording video in case any crazy shit happened, so I would have the evidence. He noticed the tattoo on my shoulder and commented on it, asking, "Is that your name?" or "Why in the hell would I have my own name tattooed on myself?" I tell him that it is my grandmother's name, which sends him into this whole spiel about how he has his grandmother tattooed on him, and he is an artist, and he draws people's faces. He leaves to go check his mail, then returns a few minutes later. However, when he returns, he has added something to his ensemble. He now has a pencil behind his ear. I suppose to make him look like more of an artist. Then he said he was going to draw my face, but I have to send him a picture so he can look at the image of me. He said he would draw me and bring the picture to the office later that week. I did not send him a picture. Months go by, no picture, and he catches me in the pool area. Fuck, no escape. He presents me with, well, I don't really know what to call it. It's me, or I guess how he sees me. The picture was drawn on a lined notebook paper in pen and looked like he threw it together in 3 minutes. He drew me black. I am white, wearing a short, tight dress. Not something I would wear. Legs 2 different sizes. It was very creepy. I keep it on my fridge to remind myself that I'm not safe. Upon closer inspection of said drawing, I noticed that he drew nipples on it under the dress. I thought, OMG, did he originally draw it naked? Next day I talked to the maintenance man about it. He says that he did originally draw it naked, but he decided to put clothes on it because giving it to me like that would be too forward. What the actual fuck? Another day, I was walking out of one of the pool gates, and he was walking in through another. I saw him out of my peripherals, but didn't acknowledge him because, well, you get it. He says, Raquel, twice in a very low voice. I am hard of hearing, so I can get away with pretending I didn't hear someone. Apparently this made him angry. The reason I know this is because he talks to one of our maintenance staff about me regularly. That person relays the weird, creepy, delusional shit that he says about me. According to him, I was very rude, and he doesn't play that where he's from. The next few times I saw him, he had this deranged look in his eyes, like he was disgusted by me. It also kind of looked like he wanted to hurt me. A few weeks go by, and he apparently gets over being mad and resumes being the creepiest motherfucker alive. The maintenance man tells me that he claimed to have met my boyfriend, and that he's a cool dude, so he's gonna back off. I asked my boyfriend if he had ever met him, and he said no. The maintenance man tells me that he claims to have met my parents when they stopped in for a visit, and they were really nice, cool people. I asked my parents if they spoke to or saw anyone while visiting me at work. They also say no. I don't know when or how he could have met them or even seen them. I never saw him around when they were here. I have confirmed from multiple different people that were there that he was nowhere around. Is he hiding in the fucking bushes? Recently, I decided to use our fitness center late at night. The fitness center has big windows that overlook the second pool on my side of the property. While I'm on the treadmill, which is in front of one of these windows, he appears, staring at me through the glass, waving at me, watching me. I pretend there is a glare on the window and that I didn't see him. He disappears into the dark shadows in the pool area, and I continue my workout. The next day, the maintenance man tells me that he talked to our friend, and he could not stop talking about how he saw me in the fitness center. He went into detail about what I was wearing, how form-fitting it was, and how sweaty I was. Overall, creepy shit that gave me the chills. I avoid the fitness center and use my real gym to avoid seeing him again. A few days go by, and my informant, the maintenance man, you get it, tells me that my stalker was wondering why I stopped going to the gym. Apparently, ever since that fateful night, he had been returning to the pool around the same time to wait for me, so that he could watch me work out again. Fucking nope. He starts to show up at the office more frequently, and I have to avoid him. Friday, he is sitting in the pool area by the office, directly behind where my desk is. There is a huge window behind me. I turn to get something out of my cabinet and catch him staring at me. He waved, I flashed a nervous peace sign, and then proceeded with my business. He is not in swimwear, but rather fully dressed. He has his notebook with him and is frantically drawing something. I think, great, here comes another picture of me, but this time in workout clothes. Nope. My coworker went to put up the golf cart and close the cabana. She has to go through the pool area to do this, so she got a glimpse of what he was drawing. A cross, with my name going down the middle. According to him, I asked him to draw a tattoo for me. So that's what he was doing. Drawing a tattoo. For me. That has my own name on it. It's bad enough that it is a cross, but with my name, that would burn my flesh. He says he's going to give it to me the next day. The next day, he didn't show up. I am not sure when I asked him to draw me a tattoo, but I'm pretty sure it was fucking never. 2 weeks pass, and I think that maybe he isn't going to give me the drawing. And enough time has passed that he gave up, and I could use the fitness center again. My friend and I went around 8 p.m., and we didn't see any signs of him, so we went ahead with our workout. I was flipping over to do leg raises on my right side, which causes me to face the door. Chills engulf my entire existence, and my heart stops for a second. He is standing directly across the street, on the phone, staring at me through the door. I start to panic and find a place to hide from view. Peeking around the corner, I see him turn and walk through the outside hallway, behind the leasing office, his normal route to his apartment. Hoping that he wouldn't come back for a while, we continue our workout. I keep glancing out of the windows every few seconds to make sure he isn't there. He reappears. Still talking on the phone, but this time he starts pacing around the fitness center very slowly, looking through the windows with this creepy-ass side glance, like I wouldn't be able to see him creeping. I keep trying to hide from view, and I'm waiting for an opportunity to get the fuck out of there. I'm hiding in a corner, and he walks up to the locked door and fucking knocks on it. He continues to knock for a solid 3 minutes, then finally leaves. He walks down the street a little way, and I take the chance to run the fuck back to my apartment as fast as I can. Today, my informant tells me that Stalker said I wouldn't let him into the fitness center for a drink of water. He said that he had just run all the way from somewhere, and he just wanted water, but I wouldn't let him in. Then he switched up his story, and said that he was trying to give me the drawing of the tattoo that I'd asked him for. 1. He didn't run from anywhere. He was wearing flip-flops. 2. He had been standing still for a good 30 minutes before coming to the fitness center. He'd gone back to his fucking apartment, where there is water, so why the fuck would he go all the way to the fitness center for water? 3. He didn't have the drawing with him. He didn't have pockets in what he was wearing, and it wasn't in his hands. He also claims to have talked to my neighbor who lives across from me, and and he said that I am a weird, crazy girl, and he should stay away from me. That shook me to my core because if that is true, then he knows where the fuck I live. I knocked on my neighbor's door and asked him about it. He says he has no idea what I am talking about. Luckily, this Friday is my last day at this property, as I am transferring to a new one closer to where I want to live. I will still live here for 2 more months. I can't wait to leave. I was in this group on Facebook where people shared different kinds of stories, mostly funny stories. I usually post comments there using my dummy account, and most of the people there use dummy accounts as well. I had a fun conversation with this guy using a dummy account named Luffy, who claimed to be 21 years old. We exchanged messages on Facebook without actually adding each other. We both found out that we lived near each other, so we decided to meet up and have lunch in a mall near our school. I chose a place to meet where it's really crowded. Since I had a dress rehearsal for a play, he told me that he would wait for me in a burger stand near our school. The night before, we sent each other pictures. I was excited to meet him since he looked pretty fun to hang out with. By 4 p.m., I stood beside the burger stand. A heavily tinted red car stopped at the street in front of me, and then I received a text message from him asking me to go inside the red car. Since I've read a lot of stories here on L&M, I decided to go with my instinct and send him a text saying that I wouldn't get in the car unless he goes out and shows himself. What happened next made me promise myself that I would never meet anyone from the internet ever again. A man, most likely in his 30s, went out of the car and started to clutch me by my arm and kept tugging me. I screamed like I have never screamed before, making it noticeable since there are civilians there as well. The guy who watched over the burger stand came to us and asked what was wrong, clearly concerned. She's my daughter. She's in big trouble. She ran away from home, was this creep's defense. I denied it every time, and the burger guy told him that he would alert the guards from our school. That's when Luffy let go of my arm, went inside his car, muttering to himself, and drove away. When the guards came, I told them everything, and I was never let out of the school that day without my guardian picking me up. Okay, so I, 29 female, switched up my career in healthcare to follow my dream of learning to work on cars. I was hired this past May at a dealership as a quick service mechanic and fell in love immediately with everything about it, and my coworkers. I had noticed how cute my trainer was. Not only was he cute, but he was very patient with training me. I was so new to working on cars. I needed to learn the basics, and he was so cute and nice about everything. I'll call him Nick, who was 40 years old. Nick and I had hit it off in every way. He asked me on our first date to go geocaching. Swoon. Nick and I have been side by side since then. I loved everyone I worked with, always laughing and playing pranks on each other, but also always helping each other and busting our asses to make the customers happy. I should add that my best friend works there, and another good friend of ours had gotten hired too. We were a close-knit family in the quick service department. Well, I didn't make it past my probationary period because I was just a bit slower. So Nick has a full mechanic garage at his dad's place, and I'd meet him after he got off work so we could make some side job money. So about a month and a half ago, Nick and I decided to get an apartment together, and it's been amazing. I've been bringing him to work, grabbing him on lunch break, and picking him up, which I love, because I can also say hey to all my old coworkers. That being said, I should add that Nick doesn't have any social media, and we are together literally all the time, except when he's working. Here's where shit gets crazy. I get a message request on Facebook from some random girl saying, "I can't believe what I am seeing. Nick is my man, and he's in your profile photo with you. He's been my man for 7 months." I immediately went into panic mode, called him at work asking who this girl is. He was just as confused. The more I talked to this girl to try and figure out what the hell is going on, the more she said weirdly specific things about Nick. Like the truck he drives, they meet up at his dad's shop, which no one would know about his dad's shop because he never talks about it. She knew his phone number and everything, but she could never provide proof. Screenshot conversations, photos of the two of them, nothing. We got to a point where it felt like this whole thing was real and that she and I were going to team up. But she never answered my calls, only messages. But after Nick and I had a huge talk about it, I knew that something wasn't right about this girl. I had to get to the bottom of it. I started getting pretty scared when one day I dropped Nick off after lunch. A minute went by and I get a message saying, Damn, Nick looks sexy in that hoodie today. This shook me up. I asked what color, and she said the correct color. At this point, my first thought is stalker, like actually watching us. I told Nick about how she knew what he was wearing and he was super creeped out. Then when I pick him up, I'll usually park by the quiet side of the building where no one can really see me. This time, though, a work truck drives by me real slowly. I pretend not to notice him because I was in no mood to chat with anyone, and I recognize the driver as a former coworker of mine that I'd only spoken to maybe 2 times during my time at the dealership. However, we were friends on Facebook. Within a minute of him passing me by, the girlfriend messages me saying, "You're waiting for Nick on the side of the building right now." In that moment, I started to freak out. This dude is pretending to be my boyfriend's girlfriend. Then after talking to Nick about it, yeah, he's the only one from work that knew Nick's dad had a shop. Nick had worked on this guy's truck before. They aren't friends, but chat here and there. Well, not anymore, but I just don't know why. He was saying such gross things to me as he was pretending to be my boyfriend's girlfriend. If he's capable of doing this, who knows what else he's capable of? He's also a giant dude in his 40s with children of his own. I have no actual proof other than the fact that anytime this girl was active, so was he. I see this dude every day, and Nick still works with him. He's in a different department than Nick, thank God. So yeah, still not sure what to do about this, but crazy former coworker pretending to be my boyfriend's girlfriend to get us to break up or something weird. Let's not meet again, even though I know I'll see you tomorrow. Hey everyone, this is my first post of an actual story on Reddit, so bear with me. I've been reading everyone's amazing stories for years and felt like it was only fair that I contribute something back. Allow me to tell you about the time I dated a guy on MySpace for 2 years that nearly ended up getting my entire family murdered, me stalked by a psycho, and everyone involved nearly losing their minds. I've never written this down before or told very many people that I even trust. It's all just too painful and, quite honestly, unbelievable to tell often. If it didn't happen to me, I probably wouldn't believe it either, but unfortunately it did. I promise what you are about to hear is 100% the absolute truth. I hope you all find this interesting. Let me give you some background for this story. I'm an almost 28-year-old gay male who was born and raised in the Appalachian Mountains, which for my friends not in America is in the South, more towards the Mid-Atlantic region. I usually don't just throw being gay out there, but it's important to my tale and to understanding why I made such insanely poor choices in my teenage years. I know almost everyone does, but this really takes the cake. Follow me back to when I was 16, just about 12 years ago. I was a junior in high school, had plenty of friends, and had no trouble with bullies. At least not while I was at school. My parents are now wonderful people who greatly regret the way they treated me when they found out I was gay. At the time, I hated them for being so horrendous to me, but as I got older, I finally understood that their reaction was just a product of the strict religious movement they and myself were brought up in. Mild disclaimer, I do not have any hatred in my heart for any religion, no matter what its views are. Whatever you choose to believe in is alright by me. I'm more of a treat people the way you'd like to be treated kind of guy. This just happened to be my parents' reaction, so don't judge them too harshly. Also, I don't want the comments to turn into a religious debate and/or LGBT rights discussion. This post is about none of that. It just so happened to be my circumstances. My parents, who at the time firmly believed that this would send my eternal soul into damnation, pretty much only allowed me to stay at our house a couple of days a week after that. For at least a year, I was living on friends' couches and off the kindness of their parents. I was in what I can only describe as the worst state of miserable, major depression I have ever been in my entire life. The first guy I ever fell in love with was killed in a tragic car accident. My parents had zero sympathy for my feelings. They were the immoral feelings of their blasphemous son, so they didn't count, I guess. I remember coming back home from his funeral that night and my father asking me, "Why are you so upset?" I didn't even respond, just walked right past him and straight into my room, where I proceeded to cry myself to sleep. Again, don't judge them too harshly. They were different people back then. Needless to say, this sent me completely spiraling downward in the worst ways possible. Drugs, alcohol, you name it, I did it. Anything to stay numb and keep myself from feeling the immense amounts of pain I was in emotionally every single day. To have your situation go from a year before seeing your father cry for the first time as you lay dying in a hospital bed, to him spewing so much malice and hatred towards you. Let's just say it was enough to make anyone have a mental breakdown. I had friends who cared about and loved me deeply. I don't know why that wasn't enough. It just wasn't. I felt like no one truly loved me or ever would. Hell, if my own parents couldn't, then what were my chances of finding a soulmate? Would I just be alone forever and as miserable as I was then? At the time, and in my angsty teen mind, that's exactly what it felt like. Which finally brings us to my background and mindset, leading into the pure, unadulterated hell that was soon to follow. In the midst of my deepest, darkest despair, the brightest idea anyone has ever had on this planet popped into my head. Well, if no one around here will ever love me, then I'll just go online and try to meet someone who will. Pure stroke of genius, right? It just made absolute biblical sense to me at the time. I felt like the only gay teen in the whole damn state. Like the only person who really understood me was me, and only ever would be me. That in order to find someone to love me, I would have to search far and wide beyond the borders of the mountainous fortress I had resided in my entire life. Like the only person who really understood me was me, and only ever would be me. That in order to find someone to love me, I would have to search far and wide beyond the borders of the mountainous fortress I had resided in my entire life. Proud of myself for having such an ingenious idea, I immediately hopped on my MySpace, which was Facebook for us old people, for all you young folks saying, WTF is MySpace, and spent the next hour making it as badass looking as I thought I could. You could customize just about everything on your profile, so, of course, mine had to accurately reflect all my emo feelings and the darkness in my soul. Word to the wise, and something I wish I realized back then. If you're trying to attract the darker things in society, you're probably going to get back exactly what you're sending out. I know I sure as hell did. It all started out innocently enough. I clicked on one of my gay acquaintances' profiles, and for some reason, this guy on his top 8 just flew right out at me. His name was Jacob. He was gorgeous, dressed in all black, and that was pretty much all I needed to know at the time. I saw he was from Maryland, several hours away from me, but far enough to possibly not be like everyone else here. Far enough to hopefully have exactly the kind of mentality that I was looking for in another human being. So I sent him a message. Something lame to the effect of, "Hi, what's up? I saw you on my friend's top 8 and thought you were cute, so I figured I would say hello." I wasn't expecting a response, none whatsoever. He was so gorgeous and seemed way too cool for me, so why in God's name would he message a guy like me back? And then it happened. Within a minute of me sending my message, I got one back. And it was from him. Not gonna lie, I exploded in joy on the inside. Something that I hadn't felt in years and years. It was just something like, "Hey, you're cute too. How are you?" But it was enough to send me over the moon. I felt alive again, but what I really felt was hope again. We talked the rest of the day and night. We talked about each other, how much life sucked, how bad we wanted to get away from our hometown and our lives. You know, the usual for teenage gay boys living in repression. I fell for him hard, too hard. I mean hook, line, and sinker hard. We chatted for maybe a week before he asked me out. I had no problem with dating online. Hell, that was the whole point of me doing this in the first place, so I eagerly said yes. We had only been dating for a week after that or so when he introduced me to the rest of his friends. I met his ex-boyfriend Zachary and their best friend Josie, with whom I quickly became best friends, along with about 10 other girls and guys. Josie was a cool chick, and she had known these guys for years. Who better to give me all the dirt on them? During the course of the next month, Josie and I became the closest friends out of everyone he introduced me to in what turned out to be a gang. They were mostly just a group of suburban white kids who called themselves the elites and just drank and smoked a lot of weed. I'd heard some crazy stories here and there about them beating people up, and some of them taking the gang thing way too seriously, but I didn't really think much about it. Josie and I had been talking on the phone every single day and really made a genuine connection with each other. She had my sense of bizarre humor, was extremely intelligent, and still liked to have a crazy good time on top of it all. During this period, Jacob and I were doing great, but there was one little problem. I had started to fall in love with his ex, Zachary, the more I talked to him. Jacob could be intense and at times violent when he was angry, from what I had heard. But on the other hand, Zachary was his complete opposite. He was too kind for his own good, an extremely caring guy, and he wrote the most beautiful piano music I had ever heard. Being a musician myself, French horn for 10 years, I was immediately endeared to this guy. The more and more time I spent online talking to Zachary, the less and less time I felt like talking to Jacob. Eventually, Jacob kind of figured out what was going on, and to my shock, He let me know he was cool with it and wished us the best. That's how after about 2 months with Jacob, I started dating his ex, Zachary. This would be the guy I would date for the next 2 years, and with whom the worst times of my life would be spent. Josie was clearly thrilled for me. We still talked every day online and on the phone. Sometimes I talked to Zachary on the phone, but more often than not, we just kept our communication to AOL Instant Messenger. When we started dating was when everything started to collapse. Jacob, who had initially said he was okay with everything, ended up exploding. He completely tore me a new one online and then proceeded to go and kidnap my current boyfriend. Josie called me up freaking me the hell out, saying he'd taken Zachary and no one knew where they were. This clearly sent me reeling from shock. I guess all the rumors I had heard about Jacob were true, and now because of my actions, the guy I'm in love with is in danger. I quickly contacted some of the older guys in the gang and let them know what was going on. Their response was basically, "Aw shit, not again," which caught me off guard. Again? You mean this happens frequently? I talked to Chaz, the leader of this gang, while he sent some guys out to deal with Jacob and retrieve my boyfriend. He basically told me in a nutshell that Jacob has been and always will be obsessed with Zachary. That when he gets wasted on whatever, he goes cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs and sets out on some wild mission to kidnap and apparently violate my new boyfriend. I couldn't believe it. I mean, I was in complete and total shock. But apparently this situation was resolved easily, and he handed over my man without too much incident. He also received a healthy-ass beating to remind Jacob that it's not nice to go around kidnapping people just because you can. This was the first, and certainly not the last incident I can remember where a pattern I'm all too familiar with now would develop over the next several years. Jacob would get drunk and jealous. He would do something completely insane to me or my boyfriend. And then after all the freaking out and worrying was over with, he would come crying back to me, begging mine and Zachary's forgiveness. This became a weekly routine, and it began to wear me out mentally very quickly. Flash forward to around a year after I had sent the very first message to Jacob. I was still with Zachary, still best friends with Josie, who I had even been up to Maryland and met in person at this point, unfortunately to miss my boyfriend, who was out of town visiting family, and was still dealing with Jacob's craptastic, insane plots to ruin my relationship and give me a stroke before the age of 20. None of this craziness set off any red flags in my head, not one. As a matter of fact, nothing during that entire year gave me second thoughts about anything going on, really. That day-to-day, the sky-is-falling lifestyle had become the norm for me, and I was used to it. Several of my friends, however, had their doubts, though they were polite enough to keep them to themselves for the time being. This was when the first true danger that threatened me and my family ever arose, and it led to a night I will never forget as long as I live. Cut to me as a 17-year-old who, in the span of 1 year, had accomplished everything he set out to do. I had the perfect boyfriend. Even if I'd never met him, I didn't care. I had an awesome new best friend, Josie. We'd hung out a few times at that point, and I adored her, and I had joined a group of my own in my hometown. My parents were going to throw me away just because of who I loved. Well, then I was going to throw away every single religious thing I had ever been taught and go to the dark side. I became a Luciferian, otherwise known as a Satanist, and boy oh boy did I think I was a badass now. Now when it comes to the coven, I joined in my hometown. That could fill an entirely different story, in an entirely different subreddit. Maybe I'll post that experience sometime, but the point of telling you about them was so you could understand what happened next. I received a call one night around 12 a.m. from Josie, who was almost beside herself. Very out of character for her. I mean hell, Zachary had been kidnapped over 40 times in the past year, and she hardly batted an eye, but this was different. She explained to me that Jacob had really outdone himself and lost his mind this time. He had hired a guy from the elites, named Sean, to come down to my house and kill me, plus my mother, father, and younger sister. My sister is about 7.5 years younger than me, and from the day she was born, I have always been fiercely protective of her. She was, and still is, my beautiful baby sister, and truly the only one in my household that I loved at the time. When I heard that my ex had taken it so far as to hire a hitman to come after my family, I flew into what we around here call a mountain rage. It didn't matter to me if someone simply came after me, but to target my precious sister, who had nothing to do with any of this, was the boiling point for me. And even though I despised my parents at the time, I'm still a southerner, and when you mess with a southerner's family, then all the crap you're fighting about goes right out the window. Complete and total defend the homestead mode kicked in. I asked Josie when he left Maryland. She told me she found out that he'd started driving towards my house maybe an hour ago, and as soon as she found out, she called me immediately. Okay, So that meant I had at the most 6 hours to prepare, and at the least possibly 4 if he got a good head start. She also informed me that Sean was a former army guy but got kicked out for failing several psych tests and being a complete sociopath in general. I'm not a big guy, and at the time I weighed even less than I do now. I was 5'7" and maybe weighed 130 pounds soaking wet, but my first thought didn't require brute strength to beat back this attacker. I called up my coven leader Brandon, who lived not even 10 minutes away from me, and explained the situation. I told him I needed to borrow his favorite toy, and I promised to bring it back in good condition with as little blood on it as possible. He agreed. About 30 minutes later, I was back home in my room, cleaning and loading an extremely nice over and under pump-action shotgun. Like I said, no brute force required. I called Josie back up and got the details on exactly what he and his car looked like. And then around 4 a.m., I told her I would call her back and crept out into my front yard. Now, for people who had never been to my house, they always got where to park it wrong. They always ended up in front of my house down a hill, instead of in the driveway on the side. This little detail was stuck in my mind and probably saved my life. In the very front of my yard, there was a huge oak tree that was big enough for my skinny girl jean wearing emo ass to hide perfectly behind. All I had to do was wait and hope he did exactly what I thought he would. I got so lucky. He parked exactly on the opposite side of the big tree I was hiding behind. I heard a car door open and someone step outside of the vehicle, shortly followed by the unmistakable cocking of a 9mm handgun. While that sound may have struck fear in the hearts of others, it absolutely enraged me to the core. So I replied in kind with a sound of my own. As I stepped around the side of the tree, he was directly in front of his car, gun down by his side. In one motion, I simultaneously pumped a shell into the chamber of my shotgun and raised it directly level with his head, about 10 feet away from me. This caught him off guard and completely by surprise. I didn't hesitate. I simply told him the God's honest truth. I said, "Buddy, you've got one of two options right now. Either you get back in your car, turn around, and drive straight back to Maryland without stopping, or you can so much as flinch in my general direction, and I will splatter your brains all across the great state of... You have 5 seconds to decide. What's it gonna be?" I kid you not. The most sickly smile spreads across this psycho's face, and for a moment I thought we were about to reenact the movie Tombstone. Fortunately, he had much more of a sense of self-preservation than I thought someone who just drove 8 hours to kill a family he never met would have. All he did was give a little chuckle and say, "You're a cool dude, see you around." He then walked backwards very slowly, my gun following him the entire way, got back into his car, and just drove off. Right then and there, I made up my mind. I had to tackle the beast head on. I was always raised that if you have a problem, be a damn man and take care of it yourself. I had to go to my enemy Jacob's home turf and bring this war to his doorstep just like he brought it to mine. It was time to go to Maryland. After all the drama of nearly being murdered by a nut job, I'd really had enough of Jacob's BS at this point. I got online and cussed him out until a fly wouldn't land on him, making a point to let him know that his little plan backfired. He wasn't dealing with some poor little boy that couldn't fend for himself, and each and every crazy situation that evolved had made me stronger as a person, if not a little bit more mentally disturbed every time. I told him he was going to regret the day he ever crossed me and my boyfriend. Instead of apologizing like usual, his true colors finally came out. He laughed at me. He freaking laughed at me. He told me I was cute when I was angry and said what a damn shame it was that I didn't have a bullet hole in my head. He wished I was dead and that he never spoke to me in the first place because he was still in love, more like insanely obsessed, with his ex, my current boyfriend of a year, Zachary. He informed me that the war was just beginning and he would do everything in his power to win Zachary back like he was some kind of adorable trophy you won for baking the best freaking pie at the county fair. Completely livid and brimming to the edge with fury, I told him to watch his back, because I'm coming for him. I called Josie and told her everything that happened and asked if I could come stay with her for a week. She excitedly agreed. Zachary was asleep for this whole ordeal and blissfully unaware that anything had happened. When he found out the next day, I think he was even more angry than I was. Fortunately for us, the gang's leader Chaz liked Zachary a whole hell of a lot more than he did Jacob. So we hatched a plan with him. The idea was for them to kidnap Jacob, like he had Zachary so many times before. They would be accomplishing this task while I was on my way up to Maryland, and when I got there, he would be mine to do with as I pleased. You can imagine on the 8-hour drive up there all the hideous and heinously brutal ideas that were going through my mind. I was going to inflict maximum amounts of pain on the guy that had caused so much in my own life. and I would relish every second of it. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, my dreams of reviving the Spanish Inquisition on my ex's head never came to fruition. When I arrived in Maryland, Josie came skipping out to greet me, happy as a lark, like always to see me. She had some good and bad news. I always asked for the bad news first, and the bad news was that Jacob had gotten tipped off by Kenny. God, I freaking loathed that guy. Always meddling where he didn't belong. That everyone was coming for him. He made a hasty retreat and had intended to kidnap Zachary and take him on the run too. But that was the good news. Before he could get to him, Zachary had hopped on a bus and headed to New York to stay with his mom while things cooled off. As sad as I was that once again I had missed seeing him for the first time, I was just relieved he was out of harm's way. Safe and sound. Again, no alarm bells going off that, for the second time that I had made the trip up there, Zachary was not around. Josie called him on her cell, and he apparently picked up his mom's, because he never had his own cell, and we got to enjoy one of the rare times we actually spoke on the phone. All was well. Now for a week of fun and plotting on what we were going to do to Jacob the next time he reared his ugly head. Later on that week, Josie wanted to drive down to an old colonial part of Maryland and go ghost hunting on these abandoned railroad tracks. However uneventful that may have been, we did end up inviting Sean to go with us. Turns out, Psycho Dude actually felt bad. Well, almost. He blankly told me that if I didn't have the balls to stand up to him, he would have killed me and my whole family for just $500. Instead of killing him on the spot, which every fiber in my being was telling me to do, I decided to play nice and get him on my side. That way, if Jacob ever tried that crap again, he would definitely tell him no, because I'm the cool dude. Sometimes you catch more flies with honey. Anyways, the rest of the week was normal and a damn good time. Josie and I said our goodbyes, and we parted ways, wishing each other a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. The next couple of weeks were semi-normal, with no word from Jacob at all. Not even a peep. What a gift, I thought. I'll take it. Year 2 of my relationship began quite happily, believe it or not. Even my birthday month of January was an unusually good one. Then came the next couple of months. 2 months that quite vividly live within me to this day. They also defined my life for the next several years. This is when the sky stopped falling and my world completely crumbled from beneath me into utter devastation. At the beginning of February, Josie had a sudden and urgent impulse to get away from her parents. Now I could completely understand that, so I happily agreed to let her come stay down south with me. I borrowed my best friend's car and drove a 16-hour round trip all the way to Maryland and back. My parents were less than thrilled. They told me she couldn't live in the house with us. So I said fine and shelled out my own money to a local La Quinta Inn, where she and I lived for almost 2 weeks before my parents caved and let us back in my house. Now I forgot to mention something extremely important earlier about my boyfriend Zachary. He was very sick. I mean terminally ill, but we thought it wouldn't be for years. I was told he had cystic fibrosis and he needed a double lung transplant in order to live much longer. He was hospitalized in the beginning of February and rushed up the transplant list because his condition was so grave. I can't even begin to tell you how after the year we'd been through together, how badly I wanted to be by his side. Unfortunately, he was at a hospital in a part of the country that specializes in treating CF and was way too far for me to travel. Josie kept me in pretty good spirits about the whole thing. She had a lot of experience with CF since her sister died from it several years earlier. She reassured me that since he was so young and tried to take such good care of himself, he would probably receive donor lungs very soon and be just fine. I tried not to worry too much, but in reality, I worried my ass off. Losing him after getting him out of harm's way so many times before was not an option in my mind. How could we have overcome so much only for him to succumb to this disease? Zachary and I talked constantly when he felt like it, and even though he was scared and alone, he said he felt like $1,000,000 knowing I was supporting him with my love, no matter where I was. That made me feel wonderful, being able to comfort him from so far away. And for a couple of weeks, my comfort seemed to be doing the trick. Until one day. That day. My boyfriend died suddenly on February 14, 2008. His lungs filled with fluid. He suffocated and died. There was nothing anyone could do. I was completely and totally lost. Josie broke the news, and I collapsed into the biggest mess you've ever seen in your life. She was still living with me at the time, so she tried to console me as best as she could while she was shedding her own tears at the loss of her best friend. That forever ruined Valentine's Day for me. To this day, it only reminds me of loss and death. You don't realize how fragile your heart truly is until you've experienced a loss like that. Little did I know that even worse moments in my life were about to occur a month later. I was headed on a course for total destruction, and still blissfully unaware of the one person who had been driving this crazy train from day one. Skip forward to March, St. Patrick's Day to be exact, a little over a month since Zachary had passed away. Josie had forcefully been returned to Maryland by her parents. Seeing as how she had practically run away, I was off in a la-la land of booze, drugs, and more pain than either of those could cover up. I was chilling with my Satanist posse doing what all normal American teenagers do on St. Paddy's Day, pretending like we're Irish and testing the limits of alcohol poisoning. My alcohol tolerance back then was ridiculously high, so I had already drunk in inordinate amounts when my phone rang. It was Josie. I slurred my words as something to the effect of, "Hey girl, what you doing?" came bumbling out of my mouth. I announced to the room it was Josie, to which everyone replied, "Hey." She had lived with us for several months, and love her or hate her, she'd become an honorary Southerner. The next words out of her mouth once again sent my head spinning off into space and my world into complete chaos. "Zachary's not dead." I stopped breathing for a moment, and when I caught my breath, I asked her to repeat that again. She did. Except this time, she added the fact that his life had been in danger, blah blah. So he had to hide even from me, blah blah. Jacob just had to think he was dead, blah blah. I could literally feel my brain dripping out from my ears as my mind turned into mush with every word out of her mouth. Then for the real kicker to my drunken mental meltdown, Zachary got on the phone. Sure enough, it was his voice. He apologized for what he had to do. I apologized for what I was about to do, which was scream and yell my lungs out, throw my phone into a wall, smashing it into a million pieces, and then proceed to go from being super hammered drunk to completely shit-faced wasted. I drank everything that wasn't nailed down. Who knows what other drugs I did on top of that, because I sure don't remember. I was literally having a complete and total mental breakdown. The last strand of sanity in my brain just snapped. I did this for a couple more hours until I somehow drove back home, put on my work clothes, and tore out of the parking lot to go to my job in a city half an hour down the interstate, with people chasing me trying to stop me. I don't recall any of what happened next, but apparently this is what I did. I showed up to work completely wasted and got fired from a damn good job. I called my father, freaking out in the parking lot of said job. He realized I was drunk and told me to stay there and he would come get me. Oh, how I wish crazy. Drunk me would have listened. Instead of doing that, I started driving on the interstate again, not caring if I lived or died, and obviously not caring about anyone else. According to the police report, I was tearing down the interstate at 130 miles per hour. I apparently hit 2-mile markers on the side of the road and blew both my right-hand tires, but continued driving with sparks shooting 50 feet out of the back of my car. I took the exit to the hospital going that fast and spun out, completely totaling what was left of my car. According to bystanders, I then proceeded to exit my vehicle and run across the damn interstate towards the hospital with people chasing after me. Once I got to the ER doors, I heard the now familiar sound of a police cruiser. I was arrested for driving under the influence. I blew a .20 about 12 hours after I had my last drink. If I had blown a .21, I would have gotten a felony charge. That led to years of failed drug tests, violated probations, and ultimately a year in jail down the line. After that, I decided enough was enough. These crazy people from Maryland and their insane concept of living could all go to hell as far as I was concerned. It had been nearly 2 years of torment, fear, and unimaginable pain. Worst of all, it was starting to cost me my mind and my freedom. I was done listening to Josie and ready to start listening to my actual friends in town, who had been begging me to stay away from those people for a long time now. Some good friends sat me down and started to tell me the inconsistencies in all their stories over the last few years. At first I didn't want to listen, but then eventually there was too much evidence not to listen. Finally, I opened my ears and my mind to what was really going on. I decided to figure this out once and for all. I got on MySpace, Facebook, and every other social media I could think of. I typed in Josie's full name into the search bar of every single one. What I found to this day still makes me want to turn my stomach contents inside out. They're on every social media platform possible. By using her name and the few email addresses I knew she had, I found dozens and dozens of accounts linked to her emails. Duplicate after duplicate of Zachary's full name on accounts with pictures of her. And the same thing with Jacob and every single solitary other person in the supposed elites. That's when it finally, after years of denial and torment, it finally freaking hit me like a railroad car full of bricks. Holy shit. She's every single one of these people. She absolutely and unequivocally made up every single solitary one of these people, and has been pretending to be a dozen or more people for over 2 years. As you can imagine, my jaw hit the damn floor. Thank God I had some close friends there who kept me from falling apart and helped me find every single fake profile she had ever created. I was dumbfounded. Profile after profile after profile that had her pictures, but the names of people I thought were entirely real. Prototype accounts before she ended up making the actual fake accounts. Gag or joke to her, really. In fact, all of this had to be one big, insane, psychotic joke. I was too shocked to be enraged yet, but don't worry, that's coming. I diligently copied every link to every single one of her profiles into my AOL Instant Messenger. Then I called her. Hey, how are you? I'm alright, I guess. Just bored. You? Nope, definitely not bored over here. Get on AIM chat and I'll show you something really interesting. I was nearly hysterical at that point, and I could tell she knew something was up. Once she was online, I simply asked her, Hey Josie, what are these? Then I sent her the link to every single fake profile she had ever created in her miserable life, and a few from email accounts I didn't even know belonged to her. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening as I heard her clicking through link after link. Her 2-year-long mental game was over and she finally realized it. Her words? Well, fuck, man. Guess you got me. She then started to laugh, genuinely laugh, as though something remotely funny had just occurred. I don't recall what I said, but apparently it was bad enough for my friends to take away the phone and have to hold me down. Catfish, the show or movie, wasn't around way back then, so I had unwittingly become one of the first hardcore victims of a stalker in the internet age. Worse than that, I had talked to, lived with, and even befriended the girl who had been stalking and trying to ruin my life for over 2 years. It was literally, and still is, the single biggest mindfuck I have ever had in my entire life. Thousands upon thousands of messenger conversations, hundreds and thousands of hours of phone conversations, countless amounts of cash being spent to drive up several states away just to stay with my psycho stalker every single time, even bringing her down to live with me for months, having $5,000 mysteriously vanish out of my bank account. Everything was starting to make sense. There was no Jacob, there was no Zachary, there was no gang. What there actually was one completely batshit insane girl with more mental problems than could fit in an encyclopedia. She was the only person I ever talked to. She was the only person I ever saw, and even worse, she was the one that paid Sean to come down to my house with a gun and try to kill my entire family. Josie was the only person in these last 2 years that had orchestrated any of this. From all the fake kidnappings and boyfriend drama to faking the death of someone I had fallen in love with and bringing him back just to screw with my head. Who the hell does that? All the events of the last 2 years came flooding into my mind as I realized in each and every one it was solely her and no one else but her. So many questions raced through my head, the least of all being why me. I deleted my MySpace and made my Facebook private. I only accept friends that I know are real. I fell completely off the wagon and out of my head. Drugs, alcohol, and more drugs. That's all I could do to cope. Here I was, a gay man who had unknowingly fallen in love with a straight woman, and regardless of whether or not I thought it was a gay man, which I wholeheartedly did, that shit still fucks you in the head, pretty bad. I didn't think I could ever be close to someone again. My world had been rocked and ruined. To this day, all these years later, I still do not trust people. I don't think I will ever be able to trust someone ever again. Can you blame me? She came down here. Yep, you heard me right. That bitch moved into my sister's town. Not even half an hour away from me. I bumped into her by accident, and we started talking. Again, as much as I wanted to stomp her in a bloody pulp on the ground, you catch more flies with honey. I wanted answers. Hell, I deserved them. I told her I was just trying to forgive her, and I needed answers to my questions in order to do so. I asked her if she would sit down with me and tell me everything, and she reluctantly agreed. I politely informed her that this forgiveness was not for her, but it was for me, so I could stop holding on to and living in the past. I explained she nearly killed me, ruined my life, and what she did was the most personal and horrific thing one human being can do to another, especially after I was so damn good to her. She was polite and let me get what I needed to get off my chest. I tried to be calm and not rude so she wouldn't run away, and I did get closure somewhat and answers to everything. Here's her explanation. Take it with a grain of salt. It started out as a joke. When she was in high school, there was a girl who was being mean to her and bullying her, so she thought she'd get her back by getting her to like a guy online and reveal the awful truth later. Haha. She had made a bunch of prototype profiles and eventually almost 20 profiles in total, so it looked like this group of people had the same friends and they were real. She just pulled pictures off of freaking Google. She knew none of these people in real life. She was having a good old time tricking this girl when along comes a spider to mess up her web. Me. She said she thought she would just mess with me a bit and let me know she was actually a girl, but after talking to me, she unintentionally fell in love with me. Whether that's true or not, I don't know what to believe. If she really did love me, then why put me through pure freaking hell for 2 years? She said she wanted to tell me a million times, but it just got out of control. And before she knew it, she was really getting into being these people, and somewhat believed she was them and they were real. Again, this chick is the world's best liar I've ever met. So who knows what the truth really is? All I wanted to know was how she got the music and how she sounded like a guy on the phone. The music, as she shockingly demonstrated to me, was actually hers. She's an amazing pianist and guitar player. I saw this with my own eyes and heard it with my own ears. Zachary's voice on the phone wasn't very complicated. She paid a guy friend a few bucks to be in on it, which this jerk-off eagerly agreed to. Ruining someone's life for a few bucks, how sweet. Sean was all hers. She paid him $500 to do that, and she had zero explanation as to why. She knew he would do it. He's just as much a psycho as she is. The rest of it was pure fantasy and imagination, all dolled up to be extra crazy, so I would care more about Zachary and give her more attention. As lie after lie was finally revealed and the truth brought to life, I had heard enough after around 8 hours of this. I'd heard everything I really ever needed to hear and wanted to. My life was nearly destroyed, my family nearly killed. My mental and emotional health left scarred forever and ever, simply because she wasn't getting enough attention in her life. Neither was I when all that started, but I didn't go about like a human wrecking ball, trying to make myself feel better. I'll never be able to comprehend or understand the mind of someone like that. People who derive pleasure from other people's pain and misery, I'll never be able to fully trust. Not in the way that's required of a true partner and companion. I just can't do that again. If I'm mortally betrayed again, I will lose it. So as I write this in my apartment a little over a decade after it all happened, I'm alone. One good thing did come from this. It sure as hell made me the person I am today, and it strengthened and toughened my resolve into tempered steel. I learned to be okay with myself and to finally love myself after so many years of self-loathing. I'm a pretty amazing person. I don't need a man to define my life and who I am in any shape, form, or fashion. Obviously, I'm worth something. Otherwise, this psycho chick wouldn't have latched onto me for years and ended up moving 8 hours away from her home to be 30 minutes away from me all this damn time. What she stole, I will never get back, but what I gained, she can never take away from me again. My senior year of high school, I started talking with this super hot emo punk kid named Brian on AIM. I was all in. I had just been dumped by my loser high school boyfriend, and Brian was incredibly sweet and always knew what to say. There were some red flags for sure. Whenever I would finally convince him to send me a picture, he looked a little different in each photo. Like they could have been pictures of different people, but it looked similar enough, and the guyliner was on point. So I just accepted it. We also never talked on the phone. I would beg him to let me call him, but he always had an excuse. Finally, the summer before I left for college, he let me call him, and his voice was super fucking weird. My friend was convinced it was a 50-year-old woman, but I was like, hell no, this is Brian. I was so blinded that I ignored every warning sign. I told him everything. He knew all of my passwords, everything about my day-to-day life. Literally every single one of my friends told me he wasn't real, that I needed to stop being a dumbass. But I honestly loved him. That fall, I left for college. My first roommate was a total windbag who had a mile-long list of rules for the room. No boys ever allowed in. I wasn't allowed to touch her Left Behind series she proudly displayed. No guests after 8, etc. So I was desperate to bounce. I found out there was an empty room and requested a transfer for the winter semester. I knew going in blind was a risk, but it couldn't be worse than Left Behind chick. At the same time, I was loving everything else about college. Things with Brian kind of waned because life was busy and I wanted to experience everything, aka other dudes. He would call me 20 times a day, message me all the time, and constantly barrage me about whether or not I had a Facebook and wanted the password to it. Hell no. Finally, I broke things off for good. The next semester, I move into my awesome new room. My roommate is a fellow freshman from MA who transferred that semester. She was loaded. She brought basically everything we would both need for the room. Her mom got us matching bedding from Pottery Barn. It was fucking awesome. She was a little weird and, always wanted to hang out the first week, but I figured it was just nerves. The first weekend after classes started, I was chilling with some friends in the quad area, and she comes over and throws her keys at me and is like, "Have fun fucking these losers." I was like, what the hell is going on? I ended up sleeping in one of my girlfriend's rooms that night because I was super freaked out. The next day, it was like nothing happened. We hung out that whole week. She was very perceptive and helpful. I was amped to have met what I thought would be my college bestie. The next weekend, I convinced her to come out, and we're having a blast dancing with dudes, and then things were escalating with me and the soccer jock, so I let her know I was bailing. We were a 2-minute walk from the soccer house and came with a group, so I figured no big deal. I get back to the room later that night, and I see that shit is torn the fuck up. Clothes ripped out of the closet, stuff all over the floor. She's sitting on my bed, and her arm is bleeding. I ask her what the hell is going on. I run and get the RA because I'm not trying to get murdered. She ended up getting committed that night, and her parents flew down. This is where shit got even weirder. She was Brian. She told her parents. They told me. He decided to try to start things with me as her true self, applied to my school, and called the housing department to request me as a roommate, emailed housing from my email, and requested her as my roommate, and then deleted the emails. Her parents apologized, said I could keep all of the stuff in the room. They withdrew her from classes, and left. I got a no-contact order and the craziest story of my life. First off, this story happened almost 10 years ago. I'll jump right in because it's long. I got home from work one day and logged into Facebook to find a message from someone I didn't know. It was too long ago to remember verbatim what was said, but it was along the lines of, "Hey, I know you have no idea who I am, but I've been trying to decide what to do for a few days, and figured I had to let you know what's been going on. Someone has been catfishing me using your identity for over 2 years, and I just found out about it last week." The sender of the email was clearly pretty shaken up and understandably was experiencing a mix of emotions. According to her, she had met the imposter online a little over 2 years prior to her writing this, and they had been engaged in a pretty intimate long-distance relationship for a majority of that time. The imposter had created a Facebook account and had, over time, reposted almost all of my photos with their own captions to them, including a good amount of art I'd drawn that they took credit for, haha. They created fake profiles for a good amount of my close family and friends, so they could comment on the photos of themselves to make the profile seem legit. The funniest part to me is that, although most things in my real life seem to be mirrored in this fake profile, I, straight male, was instead portrayed as trans. I think the main reason for this was that the sender of the email and the imposters would actually speak on the phone, and the imposter turned out to be female in the end and therefore needed a reason to justify her more feminine-sounding voice. The sender of the email was justifiably both angry and creeped out and wanted to find the catfish. She started asking me a lot of questions about my life, but phrasing them like, "Is your sister's name blank? And did you go to blank high school?" Some of them were clearly information that anyone could glean from a quick browse of my profile. But then she asked, "Is your best friend blank?" Which struck me as odd since, despite this person actually being my closest friend, and who I spend the most time with, we have barely any Facebook photos together, and most are from a long time ago. Then she asked, "Were you adopted, and are your half-siblings' names blank and blank?" Which sealed the deal for me since I knew for a fact I'd never posted about being adopted online. The sender of the email already had an idea that this person had known me in real life, but this confirmed it for me. The sender of the email had contacted me shortly after confronting the imposter for the first time. I guess after 2 years, they had finally become suspicious of the fact that the imposter wouldn't show their face. I have no idea how it took this long for them to figure out that they were being played, but I'm glad they finally decided to give the ultimatum of "show your face or I'm cutting you off." I'm pretty sure this is the point where the imposter admitted to being a catfish and that she'd been using the identity of someone she had a crush on in high school before hanging up. I was given the URL so I could look through the profile myself, which was up for about 2 days after I saw it before it was all removed. It was definitely really bizarre. The imposter had posted more than I ever had on Facebook, and it genuinely seemed like they'd lived a pretty involved double life online, as me. Almost everyone I'd posted photos with on my real profile would then have their own fake profiles created that had enough content to be genuinely convincing, so they could be tagged in and validate these new photos. Some of these profiles seemed to have gone and made their own real friends as well, and I wondered if any of those were used to facilitate even more online dating deception. Either way, the amount of time that this person had spent fabricating their alter ego's online presence was pretty shocking. The whole time I'd been crawling down this Facebook rabbit hole, the sender of the email was looking through my real profile. After a while, she sent me a message saying, "Did you take these photographs?" and showed me what I remember as a black and white photo of a barn or something. I hadn't, which was weird since everything else on the fake profile originated with me, and she'd noticed the discrepancy. We both tried reverse image searching with no luck. Then, either through a stroke of genius, or somewhat suspiciously, I really couldn't tell, she thought to flip the fake number imposter had written into the fake FB profile around in reverse, and a Google search came up with a landline that belonged to the home address of a girl that I'd gone to high school with. The real me was Facebook friends with the real imposter's profile, so we both went snooping around and found the photo that she'd claimed I'd taken, which pretty much confirmed to me that this was the imposter. I'm pretty sure there were more indicators to the sender as well, but I can't remember. I thought about messaging her for a while, but decided that it probably wouldn't lead to anything good. At the time, my thoughts were definitely, let's not meet. I talked a few times with the sender of the email just to try and decompress a bit, but honestly, I just wanted to distance myself from the situation, and also had my suspicions about the sender as well. I figured maybe it was imposter's one last-ditch effort to try and talk to me. Although when it was all over, the sender seemed to be eager to leave this all behind as well, so maybe not. Either way, it was a really strange experience. I felt mostly freaked out and violated, but I guess there was a small part of me that was flattered by it. I had a lot of mixed emotions. The weirdest part to me is that I'm a really approachable person and would have definitely been willing to talk and probably be friends if this person had just approached me instead. Although I'm still not sure if this was done out of an obsession for me, or if this person felt like I was just a suitable image to base this fabricated persona off of. I remember talking to her probably twice throughout high school and really didn't have a very good idea of who she was other than a quiet hipster girl. If either person involved reads this, I'd definitely be happy to talk now. It's been years, but I've gone from being very put off to always wondering why this person chose me over a myriad of other more attractive or interesting people online to base their other life off of. According to the sender who contacted me, she'd probably spent more time online pretending to be me than she actually did going about her own life. I have a tumultuous history of addiction and have had plenty of my own escapes, which is why it's always fascinated me that someone would want to pretend to live someone else's life as a means of doing that. Because at the end of the day, the person pretending to be me had no idea that I spent my time daydreaming of being a different person as well. I guess it just goes to show that no matter how much you wish you were someone else, chances are that person has plenty of their own reasons to want to escape their own demons for their own reasons. Thanks for listening. This happened when I was in secondary school, probably around 15 or 16. One of my friends said she had a friend who had seen pictures of me and wanted to speak to me. I said okay. Being an insecure mid-teen female, any attention was welcome in my mind. We started talking on Twitter and we got on pretty well. I asked if he had Facebook, etc., and she said no because of some security issue within the family. I didn't think anything of it and carried on chatting with him. He said he had multiple siblings, around 5 or 6 if I remember correctly, and his brother was chatting away to a couple of my friends. We were all quite excited as they were new people and not just the regular guys at school. I would stay over at her house and he would send voice notes, etc., which I later found out were from YouTube clips from some random guy's channel. There was another time we were in the local town together with one of the girls his brother was speaking to, and they were messaging saying they could see us. We didn't see them, obviously, and after that we started to talk about how weird it all was. Where did they come from? She's never mentioned them before. They wouldn't send photos. It was all just very odd. We told the other girls who were speaking to them, and they agreed how weird it was. We started to ignore the messages and carry on with our lives. After a couple of weeks, my friend who introduced us was acting really upset and worried. She said the whole family had been in a car accident. A bad one. Obviously, we were all a bit worried and maybe thought they were real after all because she was so distraught. She even took time out of class, and I went to comfort her. I was messaging the guy I was speaking to see if he was okay, as she wouldn't give any details. She was frantically texting, and as soon as she was done, a message would ping on my phone. And again, and again. It finally clicked in my head, but I couldn't believe it. I told my other friends, and they were all as shocked as me. I don't think we confronted her, but none of us have spoken to her in years. Our supposed friend catfished a number of us, flirting with us, making us feel special, and came up with elaborate stories as to why they didn't have other socials, how she knew them, and essentially how they almost died to try and get out of her lies. We all kind of forgot about it, but I think about it sometimes, and seriously get the creeps. I just can't think of an explanation for it. It's so weird to me. And to your friends, so fucked up.